Donald Trump won in 2016 because he had the votes to win the Electoral College. But journalists never saw it coming. They're still confused about how they missed this major upset, one of the biggest upsets in American history. They're slowly starting to realize it. They live in a bubble. Take a look at this story from the New York Times. What if Facebook is the real silent majority? Right-wing influencers are dominating the political discussion on Facebook, raising questions about whether it will translate into electoral success in November. You see what's happening is regular people are having real conversations. That's why they're calling into C-SPAN. If you didn't see my segment on this at 4, check it out at youtube.com/Timcast, a different channel. Went up at 4 p.m. But in it, I show 9 minutes on C-SPAN of people saying enough with the Democratic Party. But these journalists aren't paying attention. The other day, they were like, can you believe that Trump violated the Hatch Act? Nobody cares. Maybe they should, fine, but nobody does. They're worried about their cities burning down. Maybe if you paid attention to that, you'd understand why Donald Trump is winning now in many swing states. The New York Times, Kevin Roose writes, listen, liberals, if you don't think Donald Trump can get reelected in November, you need to spend more time on Facebook. Since the 2016 election, I've been obsessively tracking how partisan political content is performing on Facebook, the world's largest and arguably most influential media platform. Every morning, one of the first browser tabs I open is CrowdTangle, a handy Facebook-owned data tool that offers a bird's eye view of what's popular on the platform. I check which politicians and pundits are going viral. I geek out on trending topics. I browse the previous day's stories to see which got the most reactions, shares, and comments. Most days, the leaderboard looks roughly the same. Conservative post after conservative post, with the occasional liberal interloper. If you want to see these lists for yourselves, you can check out Facebook's Top 10, a Twitter account I created that shows the top 10 most interacted with link posts by U.S. Facebook pages every day. It's no secret that despite Mr. Trump's claims of Silicon Valley censorship, Facebook has been a boon to him and his allies. And hyper-partisan Facebook pages are nothing new. In fact, my colleague John Herman wrote about them 4 years ago this month. Let me just tell you. Let me stop for a second. There is censorship against conservatives and anti-establishment individuals. Just because they're still winning doesn't mean it doesn't exist. We all know what happened with #LearnToCode, and that's probably the best example. But many high-profile Trump supporters were purged from these platforms for BS reasons. Just because Ben Shapiro survives doesn't mean censorship doesn't exist. He writes, but what sticks out when you dig in the data is just how dominant the Facebook right truly is. Pro-Trump political influencers have spent years building a well-oiled media machine that swarms around every major news story, creating a torrent of viral commentary that reliably drowns out both the mainstream media and the liberal opposition. The result is a kind of parallel media universe that left-of-center Facebook users may never encounter, but that has been stunningly effective in shaping its own version of reality. Inside the right-wing Facebook bubble, President Trump's response to COVID-19 has been strong and effective. Joe Biden is barely capable of forming sentences, and Black Lives Matter is a dangerous group of violent looters. All of those things are true. Isn't it amazing? They just don't get it. They really don't. You see, when you actively search for news, you will see conflicting opinion. If you come on YouTube, you may run across people like me, Jimmy Dore, Kyle Kulinski, or David Pakman. Steven Crowder, Styx Hexenhammer. We don't agree on everything. Some agree on more issues than others. Some really disagree. Like, I certainly agree with Jimmy Dore on complaining about Democrats, but not so much on economic policy. Still, I think all of these individuals are doing good things. It's interesting how many of these individuals are legit commentators and not weird, cringy, grifter Twitter types. On YouTube, if you come here and you want to hear a conversation about immigration or Trump's polls, YouTube will recommend Trump's polls. It could be left. It could be right. In fact, it tends to be left. But you'll still hear opinions that are not in the mainstream. Thus, your view is going to be very, very different from those who just follow the Beltway bubble. You see, Kevin Roose is shocked by all of this because it's him. He's the one in the bubble. Think about it. If most people on Facebook, and Facebook is basically the biggest platform, believe one thing, then who's really in the bubble? The truth is, there are different bubbles, some bigger than others. And the big bubble includes people who realize Trump did a fine job on COVID. That's a fact. Is it perfect? I don't know. What else could he have done? He banned travel to China. He banned travel to Europe. He issued national guidelines they claim don't exist. He did. You can look at him. Black Lives Matter has been going around threatening people across this country. We've had riots for months. 30 people are dead. That's on Wikipedia. You seriously? You don't know this? And Joe Biden gaffes in his own commercials. We have to watch them. Apparently, Kevin Roose hasn't actually watched Joe Biden's commercials where he gaffes. Isn't that crazy? You know what happened with that? They were like, we did 20 takes, and this was the best one we could get. It's all we can do. What? You couldn't just come back later? Nah, because Biden can't form a complete sentence. These people are in a bubble talking to each other, surprised that outside the bubble, regular people are having conversations. Truly amazing. He says Mr. Trump and his supporters are betting that, despite being behind Mr. Biden in the polls, a silent majority will carry him to re-election. Donald Trump Jr., the president's oldest and most online son, made the argument himself at the RNC. And while I'm not a political analyst, I know enough about the modern media landscape to know that looking at people's revealed preferences, what they actually read, watch, and click on when nobody's looking, is often a better indicator of how they'll act than interviewing them at diners or listening to what they're willing to say out loud to a pollster. Maybe Mr. Trump's silent majority, in other words, only seems silent because we're not looking at their Facebook feeds. We live in two different countries right now, said Eric Wilson, a Republican digital strategist and digital director of Marco Rubio's 2016 campaign. Facebook's media ecosystem, he said, is a huge blind spot for people who are up to speed on what's on the front page of the New York Times and what's on the leading hour of CNN. He says, to be sure, Facebook is not the only medium where right-wing content thrives. Millions of Americans still get their news from cable news and talk radio, where conservative voices have dominated for years. Many pro-Trump Facebook influencers also have sizable presences on Twitter, YouTube, and other social networks. But the right's dominance of Facebook specifically is something to behold. Here are just a few data points I pulled from CrowdTangle this week. You're going to love this one, but let me just point out something. Maybe the reality is not that conservative people are thriving in these spaces, but liberals aren't paying attention. Easiest way to put it. Why is Seth MacFarlane begging conservatives to vote left? Oh, what's happening in this country? Did you watch the news? Why was Bill Maher wrong about the Covington kids? He's not watching the news. Now, here's the best part. He says, the conservative commentator Ben Shapiro has gotten 56 million total interactions on his Facebook page in the last 30 days. That's more than the main pages of ABC News, the NBC News, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and NPR combined. Data from a different firm, Newswhip, showed that Mr. Shapiro's news outlet, The Daily Wire, was the #1 publisher on Facebook in July. Y'all ready for this, friends? Bravo to Ben Shapiro. 56 million total interactions. That is amazing. And you mean to tell me that's more than ABC, NBC, the New York Times, Washington Post, and NPR combined? Wow. My 3 channels, I produce about 4 hours of content per day. Right now has just about 90 million views in the past month, and about 80 or so in the month before that, and about 70 or so before the month before that. And it's been steadily increasing. Here's what I love about how the mainstream media ecosystem works. You see, recently I said I'm going to be voting for Donald Trump because the riots particularly are a huge issue, and I believe Trump is best equipped to deal with the economy, and I'm not happy that I have to do it, mind you. I'd prefer not to join anyone's side, but I think, you know what? We need Trump to fight back against the extremists on the left. But let me tell you something. I'm getting more than all of these mainstream platforms. Wow. That's impressive, I guess. I'm proud of myself, I suppose. And thank you all for watching. You know what's fascinating, though? The easiest way to understand what's broken with our media landscape is that after I said I was voting for Donald Trump, people on Wikipedia started talking about including a section on my page where I said that I'd be voting for Trump. And it was rejected. You know why? Because nobody wrote about it. Because nobody cares about who I am. Because these Beltway journalists don't know what's happening. Think about it. Not to toot my own horn. I think the credit goes to all of you who watch my content and appreciate what I do. I do work really hard, about 16 hours every single day. Kind of crazy, I guess. But it's funny that they're shocked to discover how well Ben Shapiro is doing on Facebook. And they're not even paying attention to what's happening anywhere else. Now, sure, they know who Joe Rogan is because his podcast appears #1 on Apple. But how are they ignoring the major trends on YouTube and Twitter? I mean, I'm up to 630-something thousand followers, gaining like 200,000 in the past several months. My channels have been skyrocketing. I'm extremely grateful that it's happening. It's amazing. But at what point do they realize, hey, wait a minute, what about this guy? I'm glad they don't care. I'm glad they don't notice. I'm going to keep doing my thing. But isn't it funny that you and I are sitting here, essentially, I wouldn't call it a conversation, but listening to me monologue, I guess. And the mainstream media is clueless. Last year, we held a fundraiser for a company that's now Scanner, SCNR. It was the largest crowd investment for the company we used to date. It's my understanding, one of the biggest in history. It's relatively new, but this was big. Mind you, for those of you that are still following SCNR, there is still work going on behind the scenes and deals underway. The company is up and running. It's fantastic. People are out on the streets and they're doing a lot of edits and production. Not so much on YouTube for now. We'll see how things play out. There was no coverage of this. They don't know or care that we are taking over. The narrative is changing. That gives me hope. I believe the silent majority is real. The silent majority is actively paying attention. They're engaging and they're doing it digitally. And the establishment media is on the way out. Donald Trump right now is the first internet president, in my opinion. He speaks online. He speaks in memes. He's speaking to people where they're paying attention outside the media. He uses Twitter to communicate, and they hate it. But they're blockbuster video. They are going away. They are failing. They are dwindling. And in their stead rises us, me, and people like I mentioned earlier. You've got people like Styx, Louder with Crowder. You've got Elijah Schaffer. You got Flecka's Talks. You got Jimmy Dore, Kyle Kalinske. You've got David Pakman. Not always right wing, not always centrist, not always left. A mixed bag. We are all doing really well and we're growing. And their channels somewhat growing in certain areas. But I believe they're false positives. The New York Times, I think, is growing because they're consolidating all of the other paper subscribers into one. But it is dwindling. Cable TV is dwindling as well. That's why it's shocking Tucker Carlson's ratings are as high as they are. But we are winning. And this means that maybe not with Trump, but maybe 2024, we're going to get true internet politicians and the establishment will be gone. And this is good news for the left as well. Not just the populist right, but populists in general are taking over. And they're shocked to see it. I love it. They mentioned that Breitbart is doing well and that the most shared Facebook post containing the term Black Lives Matter was a video by the right-wing commentators, the Hodge twins. Isn't that amazing? Terrence K. Williams, a conservative comedian and Trump supporter, has averaged 86,500 interactions per post in August, more than twice as many as Joe Biden. Really, really interesting. Well, I'll leave it there, I suppose. I'm happy that these lunatics are avoiding and ignoring me. But I'll tell you what, there are very few channels and commentators that are hitting 90 million views per month. I'm extremely grateful that's the case. And I mean, honestly, whatever. I'm surprised people want to hear me talk that much, but I'm just going to keep working and doing my thing. And I tremendous respect and appreciation for everybody who watches, even those who watches my content, even the people who don't like me. Really do. I respect that you're willing to listen to what I have to say. But I'll leave it there. It's good news, isn't it? I'll leave it there. The silent majority is real. I got a couple more segments coming up in a few minutes, so stick around, and I will see you all shortly.